The Bolton Steam Museum is housed in a former cotton warehouse which was part of the massive Atlas Mills complex on Chorley Old Road, Bolton. It is operated by the Northern Mill Engine Society, who set out to preserve some of the steam engines which powered textile mills in Lancashire and Yorkshire. On just a few occasions through the year, the collection of engines are brought to life in steam and the doors are open to visitors. This particular visit was on Monday the 3rd of January 2011. The oldest engine in the collection is this twin beam engine, probably built around 1840, but it is not known who the builder was or its exact age. The first steam engines were beam engines, a design developed by James Watt in 1785 and based on the beam pumping engines first built successfully by Thomas Newcomen in 1712. Watt's rotative beam engine design was used in Lancashire cotton mills for 100 years. This particular engine was installed in Crossfield Mill in Wardle near Rochdale and ran until 1953. John Musgrave of Bolton built this inverted vertical engine in 1893. This type was originally developed for use in ships, but Musgraves obtained a licence to build them for mills. Being one of their smallest mill engines, developing 150 horsepower, it came from Park Street Mill in Radcliffe. It is believed to be the only engine of its type to survive. Notice the high pressure cylinder on the left and the low pressure cylinder on the right are clearly different diameters on this cross compound engine built by Roby of Lincoln in 1935. A compound engine uses high pressure steam which expands twice, initially in the small high pressure cylinder and then finally in the larger low pressure cylinder. This is a more efficient use of the steam than in a simple engine where steam only expands once in a single cylinder. The cross compound engine has the two cylinders on opposite sides of the flywheel. This particular engine was used as a teaching engine in the laboratories of the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology. Neil Carney, chairman of the Northern Mill Engine Society, opens the regulator to increase the speed of the engine. This small Airframe vertical engine was built by James Chadwick of Salford. It had been used to drive a small pump at Sellersclough Mills in Marsden near Huddersfield. This small single-cylinder engine was built by Tangy of Birmingham and is typical of thousands installed in workshops all over the country. Sissons of Gloucester were the builders of this engine as recently as 1961. It is a teaching engine and was built for the laboratories Harris College in Preston. Friction brakes were applied to each flywheel to measure the output of the engine. The general appearance of this engine is similar to Sisson's range of marine steam engines, many of which are still in operation on rivers and lakes in preserved steamboats. Langbridge Limited of Accrington were the builders of this diagonal engine. These engines were connected to individual machines and were very robust. The two equal-sized cylinders gave a smooth drive. This particular engine was acquired from Bollington Printworks near Macclesfield. The Uniflow engine was the final, most efficient design of mill engine before the widespread use of electric power. This example, built by Roby of Lincoln in 1926, was used in a sawmill in Ammanford, South Wales. Another engine by John Musgrave of Bolton is this Barbell engine. These small engines were used to slowly turn the massive flywheels of large engines until the piston and crank were in a suitable position to start or for maintenance purposes. Here are also examples of Barbell engines by George Saxon of Openshaw and Hick Hargreaves of Bolton. Mather and Platt of Manchester manufactured this unusual engine to drive stentering machines used in the textile finishing trade to stretch the cloth after dyeing or bleaching. The engine was donated to the museum in 1980 by the late Fred Dibner. A vertical Airframe engine built around 1860 by James Barraclough of Barnsley. It was in use at Redfern's Glassworks, also in Barnsley. The museum literature explains this is a true vertical design with the crankshaft and flywheel above the cylinder. An inverted vertical engine is where the crankshaft is below the cylinder. The front plate of a Lancashire boiler manufactured in Bolton by Hick Hargreaves in 1906. Alongside is an example of a boiler feed pump. These small steam-driven pumps were used to feed water into the boilers. This high-speed inverted vertical compound engine, built by Browett Linley of Patricroft in 1900, is coupled to an old 110-volt dynamo by J.H. Holmes of Newcastle, which provided lighting to a mill in Farnworth. Tangy of Birmingham built this single-cylinder horizontal engine. It was used to drive a small workshop at Vantona Textiles in Farnworth. This is actually a horizontal diesel engine, built in 1929 by the National Engine Company of Ashton-under-Lyne. Earlier in the day, it was running and its distinctive sound could be heard above the relatively quiet steam engines. A superb example of a marine-type inverted vertical compound mill engine. It was built in 1914 by Scott and Hodgson of Guide Bridge. Rescued from a scrapyard in 1995, it had previously been installed at the Diamond Rope Works in Royton near Oldham. This beam engine is believed to date back to the 1870s and was originally a single-cylinder engine. It was rebuilt in 1904 by Woodhouse and Mitchell, who added an extra high-pressure cylinder on the crankshaft side of the beam. This increased the power to twice that of the original. This was a cheaper alternative to replacing it with a completely new engine, and proved a popular device to mill owners who needed more power. This is now the low pressure cylinder, which originally was the only cylinder prior to the 1904 rebuild. The engine was used in Sellers Clough Mills, Marsden near Huddersfield. A 250 horsepower tandem compound engine, this is the most typical type of Lancashire mill engine, of which many thousands were built. The low pressure cylinder is in line with the high pressure cylinder, hence the name Tandem. The mill machinery was driven by ropes on the flywheel. Unfortunately, this example was not running on steam, but electric motors were in use to drive through the rope to demonstrate the engine on this occasion. It was built in 1902 by J&W McNaught of Rochdale. Also being turned by electric motor, this vertical cross compound engine was only recently installed and work is ongoing. It came from Jonas Kenyon's Dernside Mills, Denby Dale near Huddersfield. So there it is, Bolton Steam Museum, the largest collection of working textile mill steam engines in the country.